G'day people, I'm Sharyn. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm showing you what happens on the front of Janome's DC6050. It's an electronic machine and it has the same electronic keys on the front of it as do the electronic machines and also the computerized machines. Janome is pretty consistent with using their icons, so check along further into this video where I get into the actual buttons on the front of the machine. If you don't have this particular machine, those buttons will probably still be relevant. Big thanks to Wendy from the Janome Sewing Centre in Stirling Highway, Nedlands, who loaned me the machine for this demonstration. This particular machine is one that I very much recommend for beginners. Because it's a little bit electronic, sufficiently electronic, it actually takes some of the difficulties out of sewing with a manual machine. It's a bit like the difference between an automatic car and a manual car. These ones are easier to use, less likely to go wrong. Looking at the DC6050, I'm going to turn on the machine, so around the right hand side, I turn it on. And the screen is giving me some information here. Stitch number 00. Which I can see down here. It's a straight stitch, and that little oval shape there is indicating that the straight stitch is actually intended, or is going to stitch as it is at the moment, right in the middle of that hole under the needle. And you can see in fact that the second and the third one also do. The stitch number 03 stitches on the left hand side, so if I change the stitch now to stitch 03, so I go up here and I'm going to move this one up to 03, you can see my needle has just moved. So if I go back to 02, you can see my needle moving around. So that is what they are indicating. That oval shape is indicating where in the hole those stitches are going to happen. So the machine starts on stitch 00 and it's in the middle. This here, the wiggly line, is indicating what the width key, so where the needle is going to come down. It's actually indicating that we're on a straight stitch and it's going to come down in the middle, 3.5, of a 7mm wide hole. So it's in the middle. I can move it. If I go minus and we watch the needle here, it's moving over to the left. When I get to 0, it's as far to the left as it can go. When I hit plus, it's moving to the right. In all cases, that is still going to do a straight stitch. It's just going to have a needle drop position in different places. So we'll take that back. So if I go off stitch 0 and come back onto it again, I am back in its default position, which is 3.5. Its default stitch length, which is how far it moves along with each stitch, is 2.4. This here is showing a foot pedal. It's telling me that my foot pedal is actually plugged into the side of the machine at the moment. If I move my bobbin winder over at the top, it's now showing me a bobbin. So if your machine is only showing you the bobbin, and in fact if I take the foot control out, only showing me a bobbin now, it's telling me what's going on up there. When the bobbin is not trying to wind, then I get all that information. This is a key that will take me straight to stitch number 0. So if I happen to be on stitch number 36, rather than having to find my way all the way back, I can go straight there. I can go straight to a zigzag, an over edge and a buttonhole. That's how this operates. This is going to make my stitches longer. It goes out to about 5 mils. And it tells me when it's gone as far as it can. It will come back all the way to 0, I think. If you've got a stitch length of 0, the machine's just going to stitch in the one spot. Going back to standard is pressing that button. The other things we've got over here, this is a speed limiter. It will limit what the fastest speed the machine can go at is. So when I've got it over here and I plant my foot, it will go fast, or relatively fast. If I've got it over there and I plant my foot, it's not going to go very fast. This is my scissors. They don't operate if the foot is not down. This is my needle up down button. This is my lock stitch, my reverse key, start stop button. Up here you can see the tension dial. The only other thing you can't see at the moment is foot pressure currently set to 6. So foot pressure, tension. And the bobbin winder, as I say, when I click that over, there's my bobbin being indicated. Up here, it's got a picture of a presser foot with an A next to it. So depending on what stitch I'm doing, it's actually going to tell me which stitch or which kind of presser foot I need to be using. So for example, if I was doing, let's have a look. Stitch number 8 is an over edge stitch. It's telling me to use foot C. If I go to buttonhole, it's telling me I'm should use a foot R, which is the buttonhole foot, and it's also telling me to pull down the lever for the buttonhole. You can see me doing in the video I did on one-step buttonholes. In each case, the machine is telling me what the width is, what the length is. That's the default settings for the machine. Now we're going to start sewing. I'm going to go back to stitch 0 there, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when I move that needle. So I'm going to start off by stitching some straight stitch with the needle in the center position. And you can see it's sewing in the center position. I'm now going to move the machine to stitch number 3. And when I start stitching again, the needle's going to come up and it's going to start sewing in the left. It will still be sewing a straight stitch, but it's doing it in a different position. I can also change it by changing the width here. So at the moment it's set to 5, or 0.5 rather, which is almost all the way to the left. If I put the needle into the up position and I move this as high as I can, which is 7 mils, you'll notice it's started beeping at me and saying, "Don't go further than that." Now we'll watch it stitch and it will be right on the right hand side there. So in each case it's still doing a straight stitch. The difference is where the needle position is dropping. So we turn that, the needle drop. Having a look at these controls up the top here, this is my lock stitch. So as I'm sewing along, if I touch that, let go, but I have to keep my foot on the accelerator. It's just finished, and now I can cut. You can see there, it's cut. The threads, they're about 1 centimetre long, bit under 1/2 inch or around 1/2 inch. It did several stitches in the one spot, so it's locked off for me. You can see there, the needle drop position changed, but all I was doing was keeping the side of the foot against that edge of the fabric. I'm just working on 2 layers of fabric here. I'm going to go back to a straight stitch, my regular straight stitch, and you can see here I've got the speed controller at full bore, so that's how fast the machine can go. If I set it here, I've got my foot flat to the floor. That's as fast as it can go. So if you're trying to do something that's a bit more complicated and you don't want it to get away from you, you can use that. It's also really good if you're trying to teach children and you want them to be going a bit slower. As I'm sewing along, let's go with this again. This is my lock stitch. It looks like a little target. So as I'm sewing along, hit the lock stitch, the machine will lock off. If the foot is in the down position and I touch the scissors, it will cut the thread, and it cuts it with that about 1 centimetre length. This here is the needle up down button. So if you'll notice, every time I stop, the machine is stopping in the down position. If I put that up, that's for getting the fabric out. Try not to use the flywheel, which is over that side of the machine. Try to use the needle up down button. It will get things in the right place for you. You certainly want to use the needle up down button before you thread the machine. This here is my reverse key. So as I'm sewing along, go a little bit faster. As long as I hold that in, we'll go backwards. And I'm not directing the fabric at all at the moment, so we're going a bit skew. So that's my reverse key, that's my lock stitch. When you do a lock stitch, you have to remember to keep your foot down until it stops. If, by the way, I tried to lift this up and do scissors, it won't do it. It wants the foot to be down to do the scissors. Do sewing with the start-stop button. Press it in. The machine will go slow until you let it go. Then it's controlled by this. When you get to here where you want to finish, hold it in. It will go slow until you let go. When you start it, go slow until you let go of the button. Then it's controlled by your speed controller here. When you get to where you're wanting to go, you need to push the start-stop button again. It will go slow until you let go of it. I personally would never sew with the start-stop button because it means I don't have my hands around here in order to be controlling where the fabric's going. The times that I use the start-stop button, I very definitely use it if I'm winding bobbins, because I can't be bothered sitting with my foot on the pedal to do that. And the other time is usually if I'm making buttonholes, because the machine is going to do what it's going to do. So, next bit, cut. I don't have to have done a lock stitch in order to cut the thread. So when I touch this, I'm now on zigzag, which is stitch 6. When it starts, it's going to start with a lock stitch. Here's the lock stitch. Run that a little bit faster, and now we're doing a 3mm wide, 1.5mm long stitch. That's the default. If I take it out right now, we'll keep doing zigzag the next time I start it, because it doesn't know that it's finished and done something else. But if I do scissors and then move it along, it should do the lock stitch, I think. Yep. So it knows when it's done scissors that it's ready to begin a new row. If I do reversing in zigzag, it will reverse. There are a number of other things that if you hit the reverse button, it won't. It will do something different. We'll get onto that in a little moment. The next thing I'm going to do, though, is look here at the width of the stitch, and that's how far the needle is going to deflect from side to side. I'm going to lift the needle and just move. I'm going to take the zigzag stitch as high as it will go, which is 7 mils. When it gets there, it beeps at me and says, I've done it, I can't go any further. Let's have a look with this 7 mil. And while I'm sewing, I'm going to bring this down and make it narrower and narrower. When I get down to 0, it's a straight stitch. So a zigzag with no width is a straight stitch. That's all the widths of my zigzag. I'm going to go off that stitch and back onto it again, which puts me back on 3mm wide stitch, which is a fairly middle of the road one. Now we're going to have a look at 1.5 over here. This is how far along, this is stitch length, it's how far along the machine is going to move your fabric with each stitch. So we're going to go up as high as it goes. It always beeps at me and says, no, I've gone far enough, I can't do any more. So 5 mils, this is going to be quite a long stitch. It'll do a lock stitch to start. Now I'm going to bring this down because these will be very big stitches. As I bring it down, the stitches are going to get closer and closer together. And when you get down to about 0.3 or 0.4, that's when you get a satin stitch. Now this one, I didn't really have the right foot on for a satin stitch. It's pulling threads up from the back and stuff. But how close together you need to have those stitches is dependent on how thick your thread is. If you've got a thick thread and you get the stitches too close together, they bunch up over each other, which is sort of what they're doing there. I would recommend, probably with this fabric and thread, I should have done about a 0.4. If I was using a embroidery thread, which is finer, I probably would have needed to make that 0.3. Now that I've explained the fundamental keys on the front of your machine and how to operate it, next time we can look at some more exacting things. But I hope you're feeling a bit more confident about what you can do with your machine and how it works. See you next time.